Good morning, everyone. Welcome to all of you to the TOPS FSN Network Knowledge Sharing Meeting. The Knowledge Sharing Meeting is entitled Strengthening Connections, Inquiry, Innovation, and Implementation, and that will be our focus over the next 2 days. My name is Patrick Connors. I'm the meeting facilitator. This 2-day knowledge sharing meeting covers a variety of emerging issues and topics in food security and nutrition today, such as climate change, youth, resilience, emergency programming, and sustainability. We'll explore how research and practical application can inform one another in addressing key opportunities and challenges. We'll gain insights to address emerging food security and nutrition topics, and learn and share established knowledge and practices, how established knowledge and practices can be adapted to various situations. And I want to give a special welcome to people who are listening online. To begin, I'd like to introduce Mark Fritzler, the director of the TOPS program, who will open the knowledge sharing meeting. Most of you know Mark. He's worked in international development for over 20 years in Africa, Asia, and the Middle East, and he's been the TOPS director since its inception in 2010. Please join me in welcoming Mark Fritzler.
Well, thank you. I think it's my pleasure to welcome you all to the January 2016, I never thought I'd say those words, January 2016 TOPS FSN Network Knowledge Sharing Meeting. I think this is our 8th one, Sheila, is this 8? Yeah, I think this is our 8th one, and we've seen them grow and expand, and we're really happy to see as many of you be able to make it out with the weather this way it's been. In fact, I've noticed that conferences that are being held here right now are attracting people who are interested in these events. They're not staying away. Now, it would be different maybe if it was a Super Bowl day, but if that's probably more of an obstacle than a snowstorm for those who want to learn. But I'd like to extend our heartfelt welcome to all of you for being here. I'd like to welcome Dina Esposito, Director of the Office of Food for Peace, who will be sharing some remarks with us shortly. And I'd like to acknowledge the Program Advisory Committee. These are the members of other organizations that are providing their support to the TOPS and from a strategic perspective. Those of you who are on the PAC, can you hold up your hands? So we have PAC members out here. Very happy to have you. And in addition to which, I also would like to thank and welcome all the implementing organization representatives who are here who've been working with us many of them from the beginning, and many who have joined us in these events, these learning events, these capacity strengthening activities. For those who might not know, TOPS is the Technical and Operational Performance Support Program, and we rarely spell it out. It's TOPS. And the FSN network is the mechanism by which we engage with the community and the community of practice, as well as the way in which the community engages with itself. TOPS has basically, it started in 2010, and we're still trucking, and we're happy to invite as many people as possible to come to join us in all these events. We try to provide as many as possible. The point of TOPS and our objectives, basically, it was as founded by and spelled out in the original RFA and the proposal we submitted, is basically, in simple language, to help improve the efficiency and effectiveness of U.S. government-supported food security and nutrition programming, and secondly, to strengthen the capacity of the implementing partners to deliver those services. And we took this actually quite seriously because we thought that it was more than just information, it's more than just study, it's more than just research, but it's important that not only that the knowledge and the practices that the implementing community are employing are extended and shared across the community as quickly as possible. And there are a number of means by which this gets done, and I think one of the most important aspects, being a bit old-fashioned, I thought that we could use would be creating as many opportunities for face-to-face, people-to-people exchange. And that included not only the implementing partners, but from the very beginning, when I first started with this program, I felt quite confident that this also meant that we could include as active discussants and participants the donor community as well. And it's been my pleasure to see that that has been borne out in the donor community, the Food for Peace staff, other members of bureaus and activities of USAID. We've seen an enormous participation and an opportunity to share back and forth. And as I recall, one of the first visits I had made when I was first starting to talk about this program was to a boot camp Food for Peace was holding for Food for Peace officers in Africa. And I was invited to go, and I addressed this group. This was in Diradawa in Ethiopia in December of 2010. And I pointed out, I said, one of the things that TOPS wants to do, because I was out trying to do a little Johnny Appleseed work with all the missions and the PVOs in the region, is to provide environments, opportunities, places where professionals like you, as I was saying to the Food for Peace officers, and professionals in the implementing community can meet in a kind of shared learning environment. And it wouldn't be shall we say, the traditional reporting relationship or procurement-sensitive environments, but a time for people to actually share their knowledge, their experience, their skills, and to shorten the distance, if possible, between knowing something and learning something and doing something. And I feel that with all your participation, you members of the implementing community, and certainly our colleagues in the Office of Food for Peace, I've seen that happen. And I see that that is really a trend that probably was not as common before, certainly one that we are very pleased to see growing, and we're extremely happy that we've seen this kind of turnout to one of these events, because we sponsor a whole variety of activities in which we provide mechanisms by which people can meet face-to-face. We use also all the electronic means that are currently being used, but we started out simply focusing on how well can we bring people together and how often can we give them an opportunity to share what they know and their experience. And so we're very pleased to see that that has really continued to be the sort of core of what we do. We have all the latest technology, and we have many participants who join us online for many of our events, but we also managed to have an opportunity to bring as many people together physically and as in this room today. So with those words, I'd like to welcome you to the 2016 January knowledge sharing meeting. And one point I'd like to make right now is, could all members of the TOPS team stand up, please, in the audience? There we go. If anybody has any questions and wants to know more about TOPS, needs any help or assistance, grab one of these people, grab one of us, and talk to us. And we'll be happy to share with you and show you how you can participate. So welcome and enjoy.
Okay, thanks very much, Mark, for providing that valuable overview of TOPS. Now, as Mark said, we're very fortunate to have with us as the keynote speaker for this knowledge sharing meeting, Ms. Dina Esposito, the Director of the Office of Food for Peace in the Bureau of Democracy, Conflict, and Humanitarian Assistance at USAID. In this capacity, she oversees the agency's food assistance programming spanning 48 countries worldwide and valued at $1.5 billion annually. Ms. Esposito began her career as a Presidential Management Fellow at the State Department, where she covered African refugee assistance issues in the Bureau for Population, Refugees, and Migration. From 1992 to 1999, Ms. Esposito worked at USAID as the Disaster Response Manager for the Horn of Africa at OFDA, covering the Somalia famine response in the early 1990s, among other humanitarian emergencies. She also worked with USAID's Office of Transition Initiatives on new programming approaches in post-conflict contexts. In addition, she served as a senior policy advisor in USAID's Bureau for Humanitarian Response Office of Program Planning and Evaluation, and in the Africa Bureau's Office of Central and West African Affairs. From 2000 to 2006, Ms. Esposito worked as a consultant, working with USAID, a variety of NGOs and for-profit organizations on policy analysis, program design, and training staff working in conflict and post-conflict settings. Prior to rejoining USAID, Ms. Esposito worked from 2006 to 2010 for the NGO PACT, based in Ethiopia, as PACT's chief of party on a democracy, governance, and conflict mitigation program. And she also served as PACT's regional peacebuilding advisor in Kenya. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dina Esposito.
Thanks, Pat. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see all of you here in spite of the weather, or maybe it's because of the weather. Everybody had to get out with cabin fever, so we've actually upped your attendance. I just want to thank TOPS for inviting me to offer the keynote address this year. It was actually 5 years ago now, in 2011, that I traveled to Baltimore to participate in TOPS' inaugural knowledge learning event, which I think was co-facilitated with the core group. And it was there that I gave my very first presentation as the Food for Peace Director to NGO partners. And so it's fitting now, I think, that here it is, 2016, I'm celebrating my 5-year anniversary with Food for Peace. And I'm conscious, and perhaps TOPS is too, that my tenure in Food for Peace is likely to close by January 2017 with the end of the Obama administration term. And so it is very nice to be asked to come here today to offer some reflections on my tenure and how I see things have evolved in the last 5 years. The new Food for Peace strategy will be discussed later in the next couple of days, and I think that does capture, perhaps better than I can do here today, a lot of the key trends and themes that I think are most important. And I would flag that I see that as really a flagship document, and that will not only set a blueprint for the future, but importantly captures the evolution of the program and the context in which we're working. So I want to offer a few reflections on a few of the important changes I've seen in my tenure as Food for Peace Director, ranging from the changing nature of emergency response and the changing nature of our toolkit, our relationship with Feed the Future, and our evolving understanding of nutrition and how to tackle it. And then I'm going to turn and give you a quick preview of some of the high points of the strategy that I just want to draw your attention to. To start, though, I wanted to note that one of the changes that I think is important to mention relates very much to TOPS and the convening of these kinds of knowledge sharing meetings. The TOPS midterm evaluation has on its cover a quote from a public health related article in the New Yorker by Atul Gawande, which says, "We yearn for frictionless technological solutions, but people talking to people is still the way that norms and standards change." The TOPS design was Food for Peace's answer to an evaluation that found that our prior generation of capacity building activities for PBO partners were not generating the kind of dialogue that leads to improved norms and standards. Partners were not sharing best practices, and tools were kept inside individual organizations, thereby limiting the desired wider benefits for the entire implementing community. Today, TOPS, with its suite of approaches, including direct capacity building activities, an inclusive community of practice, the food security and nutrition network with accompanying technical task forces, and a small grants program that promotes field-led and collaborative initiatives, is facilitating the kind of people talking to people that we hope will ultimately redound to the benefit of the most food insecure and vulnerable that we seek to help. I mentioned this at the outset because this theme of collaborative learning, partnership, and even collective action are ones that you will see woven throughout the new Food for Peace strategy. There is other evidence of these kinds of approaches at work today in Food for Peace as well. From the collaborative midterm evaluation we did with our PBO partners in Guatemala, to our resilience efforts that aim to sequence, layer, and integrate Food for Peace programs with other USAID activities to achieve more transformational results. So in this regard, I believe TOPS is a very positive sign of how Food for Peace's approach to the business of food security has evolved in these past 5 years. And I commend the TOPS leadership and all of you who invest in the community of practice for these advancements. Another trend I want to highlight today relates to thinking anew, the thinking anew that is going on with regard to humanitarian response, in part because of the overwhelming level of need in the world, and in part because of the varied contexts in which that response is required. On the emergency side, 5 years ago, the world was largely focused on dealing with the looming mega natural disasters that would be driven by extreme climatic events like ever more frequent droughts or floods. We are indeed dealing with such natural disasters, witness the ongoing response to the El Niño crisis today, but few expected the extraordinarily rapid rise in human suffering from the impacts of armed conflict. Today, more people are displaced, some 60 million, than at any time since World War II, and half of them are children. And unlike in previous conflicts, say, for example, in Africa in the 1990s, we find that many of the newly displaced, especially from places like Syria and Iraq, are not in camps, but are widespread throughout communities, rural and urban, sometimes in middle-income countries, different contexts, different response requirements. So while the humanitarian assistance has in many ways never reached more people in so many places, it is increasingly clear that the system is unable to adequately address the scale and complexity of humanitarian need. This is the issue at the forefront of the World Humanitarian Summit this year, which is calling for greater alignment between relief and development practitioners, deeper engagement with the Global South, a sharper focus on game-changing science and technology, and increased efficiency of humanitarian action. A challenge before us is to be sure we as a community maintain our readiness to move swiftly with emergency response, improving our strategies in ways that reinforce local capacity, improving our strategies, put people first, and focus on outcomes as well as inputs. Finding new ways to more efficiently meet the needs of vulnerable groups when needs far outstrip resources, prioritizing the special nutritional, protection, and other needs of women and children in these settings, determining how approaches like unconditional cash transfers can sit comfortably alongside strong sectoral analysis and sectoral results, and harnessing new technologies to deliver aid and monitor programs. These are among the challenges before us on the humanitarian side. The solutions will necessarily require relief and development practitioners working together. Because many of your organizations work in both spheres, I hope that your food security teams and your emergency response teams, should they be different, are beginning to break down silos and creatively considering what role you will play in response to the enormous and evolving humanitarian crises before us. While as yet unwritten, these roles will not only require breaking down stovepipes within organizations, but also require embracing new partnerships with both public and private sector partners and leveraging opportunities to strengthen local capacities and ownership during the provision of aid. In the context of growing humanitarian need, Food for Peace emergency programs have grown in sheer size and complexity. This year, Food for Peace's budget will be $250 million higher than last year on the Title II U.S. in-kind food side, and about $100 million higher on the IDA OCO, or the cash side of our programs. Many thanks are due to those of you who discussed with Congress the growing needs globally for food assistance, and to the representatives and senators and their staff who once again demonstrated that through these budget numbers, the compassion and willingness of the American people to step up and deliver life-saving aid when it is needed. In 2009, Food for Peace had one response tool, in-kind food aid, to respond to hunger abroad. Surely one of the legacies of these past 5 years is the establishment of the Emergency Food Security Program. Beginning in 2010, Food for Peace began administering EFSP, which is now funded from the International Disaster Assistance Account, as well as the Overseas Contingency Operations, or OCO, account. Today, Food for Peace is now not only the largest provider of in-kind food aid, but the largest provider of cash-based food assistance as well, if you consider voucher programs and local and regional procurement in this category of funding. This has assured our relevance in crises like Syria, where large-scale in-kind food from the U.S. is not feasible, and has allowed us to delve more deeply, I would argue, into critical questions about dignity, appropriateness, timeliness, and cost efficiency, knowing that we have more than one choice now in terms of how we respond. In addition to the EFSP program, another notable milestone, of course, were changes to the Farm Bill, which included the provision of an additional $100 million in cash flexibility for Food for Peace. Our PVO partners working on both emergency and development programmings are taking advantage of these new flexibilities. In 2015, 33%, some $340 million of our EFSP funding for cash-based emergency responses were programmed through PVOs. On the development side, partners are using the new flexibility to promote local access to nutritious foods and paying beneficiaries in a voucher or a cash transfer rather than food for public works where markets are functioning. So today, much of the time, though I would submit not all of the time, we are able to apply the right tool for the right context based on having both cash and in-kind food resources. Needs change from year to year and even month to month, and having the necessary flexibility to respond efficiently and appropriately as needed remains a priority. Today, Food for Peace often blends approaches, using both in-kind and cash-based food assistance to respond to a food security crisis. We might combine the local procurement of beans, for example, with a contribution of Title II oil from the United States. Or one part of a country may benefit from vouchers, while another part of the same country may not have sufficient market capacity to handle that kind of response. The analytics around how we make those choices have certainly become more complex. As we consider speed of response, seasonality, cost effectiveness, beneficiary preference, security, market conditions, and other factors. It places high expectations on our partners' ability to assess local context and response options as well. Our staffing numbers and patterns and business processes, including IT systems and procedures, are evolving to assure that Food for Peace can manage all of these resources effectively and accountably. While not without its challenges, I believe for the most part, Food for Peace staff are excited by the new dimensions of food assistance, the innovation and highly context-specific responses that increased flexibility allows for. We are, together with all of you, shaping the future of a growing and more complex emergency and development food assistance program. As you may have noticed, we have begun to insource our country-specific information for development programs in Food for Peace. We are experimenting with a refine and implement approach to our new development programs. We have asked Food for Peace staff to become more deeply engaged in evaluative work so that we can promote shared learning with partners and bring that learning back into the office. We have expanded the guidance available to partners on monitoring and evaluation and created technical chapters to accompany our development solicitations. We have also improved our onboarding orientation and training for staff, including training on markets and cash-based programming. We have expanded our technical team significantly to help us manage the growing complexity of the portfolio. We've also enlisted the Human Resources Department of USAID to study our current staffing pattern and organizational structure and ask them to make recommendations to assure that we are fit for purpose as our programming, tools, approaches, systems evolve. They have completed their work and will be making recommendations soon. Here I also wanted to mention that we've embarked on an independent review to be conducted by an outside organization of the OFDA, the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance, and Food for Peace relationship. What would the overall U.S. humanitarian response, would the overall U.S. humanitarian response be any more efficient or effective if we and OFDA had a different operational relationship? Could we merge our information or technical teams, for example, or co-locate in the Ronald Reagan building to improve collaboration? What would be the pros and cons of merging Food for Peace and OFDA into one operational unit? This is not meant to be a decision-making review, but it will offer food for thought for our new administrator and for the next administration. We have asked that the organization conducting this review, not yet selected, engage a wide range of OFDA and Food for Peace stakeholders on these questions. So I can expect that you will be hearing shortly more about this and a request for your engagement on that topic. Another major shift in the last 5 years, of course, is that Food for Peace development programs are now operating on a world stage in which donors have committed and recommitted to investment in food security, nutrition, and sustainable agriculture as part of a global political agenda. When the President launched the Feed the Future initiative in 2009, there was an outstanding question. What is the relationship going to be between Food for Peace and Feed the Future? The answer to this question has evolved and continues to evolve very positively, in my view. In 2011, Food for Peace adopted the relevant Feed the Future indicators for its programs, and today reports its results annually into the Feed the Future Management Information System. Having our results there gives new visibility to the size, scope, and impact of Title II development programs. Importantly, the Feed the Future framework also adopted Food for Peace's depth of poverty measure, recognizing the importance of capturing USAID programs' impact on ultra-poor populations living well below the poverty line. Community development funds, which are development assistance or DA monies, were originally provided to Food for Peace from the Bureau for Food Security to reduce the need to monetize Title II resources and to improve sustainability of impact. But they have accomplished much, much more. They have facilitated true co-investment with the Bureau for Food Security, and this has led to new kinds of collaboration, not only between Food for Peace and BFS, but also between Food for Peace and Global Health and USAID missions. Just this year, both the Malawi and Uganda missions amended their Feed the Future target areas or zones of influence, not only co-funding our development programs in these areas of chronic poverty and recurrent crisis, but also layering additional Feed the Future project activities there to magnify impact. The same is true in the arid lands of Kenya and the Sahelian bands of Niger and Burkina Faso, where we have long focused and where Feed the Future is now bringing in additional resources to address our shared resilience agenda. This collaboration has shined a spotlight on Food for Peace work, and I and many other Food for Peace team members have traveled in recent years with both Global Health and BFS staff to see Food for Peace programs in the field for the purpose of shared learning and co-designing complementary interventions. This is an important milestone in the evolution of Title II development programming. I believe that our programs today offer a unique window for other parts of USAID to see how the agency can effectively address the needs of the ultra-poor, an agenda that has taken on a much higher degree of importance during President Obama's tenure, both as a result of a growing global commitment to ending predictable crises by increasing the resilience of communities exposed to recurrent shocks, as well as the emerging global vision shared by the U.S. that ending extreme poverty is within our grasp. Food for Peace was extremely well placed and stepped up to help shape USAID's resilience policy, as well as the USAID Ending Extreme Poverty paper, and now plays a central role in achieving both. This would be the moment to point out that we have in recent years approved 2 development awards that did not include any Title II food aid. In both Nepal and Mali, one with CDF funds and one with Title II monies. What does this say about Food for Peace? I believe it acknowledges that what we bring, our comparative advantage, is our knowledge and understanding of how to design and implement multi-sectoral community-based programs that include a regular and timely transfer, be it a Title II or a locally procured food transfer, a cash transfer, or some other form of transfer that allows people to invest differently in their future, something we then facilitate through our multi-sectoral programming support. Our learning, including our sustainability study, has also told us that transfers need to be handled carefully and phased out early, linking beneficiaries to local solutions that can be sustained when we leave, and that our progress may have to be smaller and more incremental, Because big one-off results at program's end may not only be unsustainable, but undermine people's sense of agency and capacity to cope when we withdraw our resources. We also know and have a comparative advantage in promoting an agenda for those who, for whatever reason, will not be able to feed themselves, no matter how many years of development assistance we offer. The solution lays not in endless aid, but in a safety net that is owned locally with both local community and government engagement, and with multi-donor support if necessary. Our work in Ethiopia and Haiti are examples of where we are recognizing that Food for Peace has a special role to play vis-a-vis social protection and safety nets. At the same time, we recognize, and this is articulated in our strategy, that we have more to learn in terms of strengthening the local institutions charged with managing and ultimately financing these programs. The last area I want to discuss before turning to the strategy itself is nutrition. The Food Aid Quality Review Report, issued in 2011, was a milestone for Food for Peace and led to the reformulation of all milled and blended foods, including our corn-soy blend, to ensure its micronutrient formulation better addresses the needs of the vulnerable groups we serve. We also launched production of ready-to-use therapeutic and ready-to-use supplementary foods, RUTF and RUSF, helping fill global supply chains for these products that have been so transformative to the prevention and treatment of malnutrition. These are steps that are fitting of the world's leader in food assistance, and were long overdue. But the Food Aid Quality Review, as well as new research findings published in Lancet and elsewhere, have also led to deeper questions about how best to program resources to impact both stunting and acute malnutrition. Within Food for Peace, this has led to a whole series of collaborative research efforts, both with our UN and PBO partners, as well as joint programming with the Global Health Bureau to better align our work and identify mutually reinforcing approaches. While the results of our PM2A research, the Programming for Malnutrition in Children Under 2, has not yet been finalized, this approach we have already found in some cases, which combines both take-home rations with behavior change messaging, has proven challenging to implement and has had mixed results in terms of impact and sustainability. Our new strategy will encourage partners to continue to explore other approaches to improving a quality diet for pregnant and lactating mothers and complementary feeding for children under 2. It will also flag the emerging evidence of the importance of dealing with environmental contaminants on nutrition and health, as well as the need to address nutrition among adolescent girls. It commits Food for Peace to continuing to support formative research to inform our nutrition programming, which is sure to evolve substantially over the life of the strategy. Okay, now I just want to close my remarks with a few highlights from the strategy itself. This vision was not crafted in the Food for Peace offices. It was forged through extensive consultations, dozens of meetings, and hundreds of people engaged in the process, not only through meetings in Washington, but abroad, and webinars, and a call for papers. Hopefully, you will see your thinking reflected there. The new strategy embraces and builds upon the old one, recognizing that the 2006 document was indeed a visionary and forward-looking strategy in and of itself. But this one strikes a more ambitious tone, moving us from our old objective of reducing food insecurity of vulnerable groups to the more lofty objective of improving and sustaining food and nutrition security for vulnerable groups. Nutrition features in the strategy's revised definition of food security as well. There are many interesting pieces we could discuss, but just to highlight a few of you to whet your appetite for tomorrow's presentation. The strategy maintains the centrality of Food for Peace's commitment to working with vulnerable groups, but recognizes that sustainability requires linkages to community-level and systems-oriented interventions. Of course, to some extent, Food for Peace programs have always recognized this, but these connections are elevated, a decision grounded in our recently completed sustainability research that you will also learn more about this week. The strategy also reflects our commitment to supporting capacities that contribute to resilience and reduce the need for external food assistance. It reaffirms the office's commitment to enhancing the productivity of resources held by smallholder farmers, but recognizes that diversification of livelihoods, including off-farm livelihoods, is one path toward resilience for many poor households, and that increased access to income is foundational to food security and transformational change, thus linking us more directly and explicitly to the USAID agenda of ending extreme poverty. The strategy also records the growing use of cash-based food assistance as it relates to life-saving humanitarian aid, risk reduction, and social safety nets, and its importance for recovery in terms of strengthening markets and supporting financial systems. It enshrines cash-based food assistance as well as it enshrines cash-based food assistance as a now well-established part of Food for Peace practice and commits us to continued improvement of our analytic tools and guidance for its use. To this end, we are launching our own evaluation of the EFSP Emergency Food Security Program in the coming year. It also discusses how Food for Peace and Feed the Future work together along the lines that I spoke about this morning, the complementarity of our approaches and the nature of our collaboration. The strategy places great emphasis on partnership and collective action. We acknowledge that it takes more time and it is harder than going it alone, but our theory of change is that through deeper collaboration and partnerships, we are going to be more efficient and achieve better results for vulnerable communities. I take some pride in what we've accomplished to date in elevating the importance of gender equity in our development programs. This new strategy has inclusion and equity as cross-cutting themes, and also for the first time calls our partners to consider youth, like gender, as a cross-cutting issue. For Food for Peace development partners, this will be an opportunity to consider the challenges and opportunities youth face in engaging in on and off-farm employment, in accessing basic services, and in participating in decisions that will ultimately shape their future. Building on the importance of inclusion and equity, the strategy also embraces social accountability as an operational approach to empowering populations by strengthening the agency of the most vulnerable to demand opportunities to improve their own food security, while facilitating greater transparency and responsiveness of the institutions responsible for providing those opportunities. Finally, it adds an explicit focus to applied learning, recognizing that we are getting better and better at gathering data, but we need to apply that data and that learning to real-time program adjustments and new designs. In so doing, we aspire to create a staffing structure in Food for Peace that facilitates learning and ensures staff are rewarded for identifying and amending approaches when evidence suggests it is necessary to do so. So in closing, this rather long set of musings, as well as my enthusiasm at seeing a new Food for Peace strategy emerge during my tenure, is a reflection of my desire to record some of the extraordinary shifts that are underway, shifts that have come about not only because the tools we have are more varied, but because the context in which we work is changing, as is our knowledge base about what works. And although my time in Food for Peace will not extend through the life of the strategy, it does offer a snapshot of this moment in time and some guideposts about how we hope to collectively tackle the outstanding challenges of food insecurity in the world today. Hopefully, much of this material is not new to you or surprising, because we've been developing these approaches these last 5 years in concert with all of you. Since the early 1990s, the world has nearly halved the proportion of people who are undernourished, reduced childhood stunting by 41%, met the MDG goals for child mortality, and reduced the proportion of people living in extreme poverty from nearly 50% to 14%. Food for Peace programs and partners have been and will continue to be part of the hunger solution. It has been and remains a privilege to work with all of you on our shared agenda to combat hunger and malnutrition. I salute all of you and wish you a successful workshop, reminding you that people talking to people is still the way that norms and standards change. Thank you.
So we're going to take about 15 minutes of Q&A. So could people who have questions they'd like to ask raise their hands, and we'll have mic runners going to bring you a mic. So we have a first question over here.
Take 3 or 4 at a time.
Okay, so we'll do 3 or 4 at a time.
Dan Norrell, Economic Development Senior Technical Advisor for World Vision, Food Security and Livelihoods team. Dina, thank you very much for your broad strokes in terms of your work and what we've all been working on together. My question really relates to young moms and stunting and off-farm livelihood work as well as on-farm agriculture work. How can we, within both in EFSPs but especially in DFAPs, how can we use our evidence base and what we're doing really at program management as well as technical design to try to reduce stunting and a focus again on young moms and even young moms and young dads, looking at both the off-farm income piece, the on-farm income piece, and the gender piece.
Okay, thanks. Do we have another question? Other hands? Okay.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks again, Dina. Reflect the comments from the previous question. Very good presentation. My name's Owen Calvert. I'm with ICF International. I was pleased that you mentioned the word data. I think probably in your rounding paragraph, because that's where I'm involved and with the work I do. Perhaps you could just elaborate a little bit more on the information sources and the projects that Food for Peace have supported in the past in terms of generating that sorts of data that leads to increased knowledge and hopefully better programming. Thank you.
One more question in this round. Over there.
Hi, Dina. It's Mara Russell from CARE. And I was really intrigued with the fact that Food for Peace is doing kind of a management review in terms of their structure, and then also some of these ongoing discussions with Usda. Could you maybe give us a little bit of the backstory on that in terms of what kind of inefficiency do you see at the moment, and what is it that you're seeking in terms of efficiency?
Okay. Do you want to do those three?
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks.
Great.
I think I'll take them in reverse order, if that's okay. I think the decision to invite HR in to take a look at our systems and our staffing pattern was a clear decision that emerged from a summer retreat that we had with the USAID Washington staff, who just felt that we had changed so substantially in the last 5 years, both in terms of the volume and the types of monies and types of approaches, that we really needed to invite some folks in to look at whether or not the way we're organized still makes sense. The number of the staff to manager ratio has grown dramatically as our staff has grown to manage these new and different resources, meaning that new staff don't get enough time with their management teams. The usual types of growing pains that I think any organization that changes or practically doubles, I think, in size in terms of staffing and whatnot would experience. And so recognizing that those of us on the program side may not be the ones with all the solutions when it comes to organizational management and architecture, that we wanted some other eyes on that. So we're very much looking forward to that, and I would expect that you will see, I don't think it will dramatically change your level of how you're engaging with Food for Peace, but certainly hopefully giving staff more breathing room to focus on the things they were hired to focus on and to facilitate processes and improve systems, I think, are sort of what we're looking at for that internal review. I think the discussion with OFDA has been, I think, long in coming, in the sense that now that we are both sort of co-owners of the IDA account, the International Disaster Assistance account, we're both involved in cash-based programming, we're both interested in food security writ large. We have regular conversations with them whenever we're funding a grant about which office is the most appropriate office to support that. Is that a food security mandate transfer, or does that have some other objective, and therefore how do we each honor our mandates? We're more and more blending our monies. So we have programs where OFDA is supporting transfers that are related to non-food requirements, agricultural implements, seed vouchers, these sorts of things, Food for Peace handling the transfers that are related to making sure people have food to eat, food on their table. So I think that just said, well, if we have the technical team of OFDA and the technical team of Food for Peace reviewing the same grants, do we need that double look, and are we looking at them from the same perspective, or how do we keep all of that going on? So that's just a simple example of why we think there might be some efficiencies of time gained. Also on the information side, I think we'd like to see, to be sure that the public documents give equal time to the different components of the response. And we have never had a strong, OFDA's always had the lead on information, but increasingly now we are having to put together our own products. And so again, having those information teams communicate and come up with documents that reflect the full range of AID's response to humanitarian issues in the world today are just things that we think are worthwhile looking at. The World Humanitarian Summit is calling on all of us to do business differently. And so within that frame, it also makes some sense, I think, to ask ourselves if there's more that we can accomplish on that score. On to data. I think all of you know that some of the data we're bringing in now is related to the work that Owen and his team are doing to the independent baselines and final evaluations. So my reference at the end about getting that data back in is how many PBO partners are amending their programs based on the baseline. Are you feeding back in the findings of that baseline, or because you don't do the baseline, you don't own the data, and therefore that connection is not getting made, right? So when I talk about that importance of now we're getting the data, but what are we doing with the data? That's an example of what I'm talking about. FuseNet has been collecting data since 1984, which should be a public good, and we would envision all of the data that FuseNet has collected on prices and other things to be put online. So for all researchers who are interested in using those data sets for their work. The data that we collect and give to Feed the Future, FTF-MIS, that is the first time that we are rolling up our results, right? We have a set of standard indicators that we're rolling up, but what does that data tell us? What are we doing with that data? I just think there's a lot of work to be done there that is still ahead of us, but we're getting a grip on it. We're getting, we have a much more robust monitoring and evaluation team, new systems and databases to work with. So I think those are positive trends, but still a lot of work to do. On how can we work with young moms, what do we do about stunting, on-farm versus off-farm work? I think the answers are still ahead of us. I'm not going to have that solution for you. But what we are giving you permission to do is to think about it, because Food for Peace has traditionally, been, well, we help people grow more food, and that's how we're going to reduce food insecurity. I know that that's a gross generalization, but in general, we have been very focused on helping smallholder farmers grow more food. But we recognize that they will not be self-sufficient, be just growing food on an ever smaller plot of land. And so we're giving you permission by saying you should think about off-farm livelihoods for smallholder farmers and their families to think about that in a way that maybe you felt boxed in and couldn't think about before. And so mostly I think that we still have a lot of trial and error and experimentation ahead of us. And that's why I've sort of flagged that I think that we're going to be talking very differently about nutrition, I think, in 5 or 6 years than we even talk about it now, because we're just learning so much about what works and what doesn't, and the need to blend approaches for good results. I think that's it.
Okay, so we have time for about 3 more questions, if there are some, and I see we have one in the back. Then 1, 2,
Hi,
3.
Dina. This is Tim Frankenberger from Tango. I agree with you that this new emphasis on measurement as part of a learning agenda is really important. But one of the concerns I have when you take the existing survey instruments and you add the Feed the Future indicators along with the new indicators that we're collecting on trying to measure resilience, without actually reviewing whether the F indicators that are in there are actually worthwhile and should be in there, because I'm not convinced that a lot of those F indicators are ever analyzed and used to feed back into programming. So what happens is when you continue to add more indicators to these survey instruments become so long, start to question whether the data accuracy is actually there when the questionnaire takes 2 hours or 3 hours to collect. And then it's not that useful for NGOs either, because a lot of those indicators are not ones that they're using anyway. And so I think if we're going to, maybe before you leave, you can kind of push that agenda forward.
No problem. Just take care of those F indicators for you, Tim. That'll be easy.
All right, so we've got another question here. Thank you.
Hi, Dina. I'm Isabel Pelly from the Cash Learning Partnership. I was just wondering, I really welcome your comments on, our increased toolkit of responses and the analysis required to use those effectively. And so I was curious to know how Food for Peace is working with other donors to try and align requirements for response analysis and also monitoring of outcomes. Thank you.
And we had a third question over here.
Hi, Dina. That was a great presentation. I'm Janine Schooley with Project Concern International. I may have missed it, but I didn't hear when you were talking about collaborating and coordinating better with other entities, USG entities. I didn't hear USDA, and I was just wondering what, if anything, Food for Peace is doing to sort of reach out across those streets to USDA and vice versa.
And we, since this is being shared online, we do want to take, we have one question from online, if that's all right, a fourth one.
Says, what are some of the most important lessons FFP has learned from local and regional procurement, and how are these lessons being applied to improve programming?
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. Okay. Tim, I appreciate what you're saying about the length of the surveys and the problems that we have there. I will have to defer to someone else on how you get F indicators changed. I honestly don't know the answer to that question, but I hear you. So, and I'll take that back. Feel your pain. Feel your pain, yes. How are we working with other donors and aligning outcomes? We have gotten copies of, we share information with ECHO and DFID in particular. There is a discussion within the World Humanitarian Summit about streamlining our reporting requirements. This is not an easy thing to do, and different donors obviously have different interests, and I don't think that we're actually even the most demanding in some circumstances when it comes to reporting. I would flag that we actually have maybe some difference of approach with our European colleagues. I mean, they have promoted hard within the World Humanitarian Summit the cash first principle. We would say that we have a people first principle and that we should look at what people need and then apply the tool that gets them there. And so we are fortunate because we know how to work with all of these different tools, and others have only work with the cash, and so they're, I think, more limited in their decision tree process, for example. We've developed a tool for our teams, and I think it may be shared with you this week on the, how you look at the different options available to you and what choices to make. So I would say we are not exactly on the same page with our European colleagues, but we do appreciate that when we're all working in the same space with similar programs, that we should come to some common understanding about what those outcomes should be. That said, Food for Peace is always going to be looking for a food security outcome, right? It's our mandate. Whereas Europeans will be, well, we're just looking for like a multi-purpose result. And I'm not sure what they would point to. So I think there's still a lot that needs to be worked out in this area, and it will evolve for sure over the next coming years. The PCI, what are we doing with USDA? Well, obviously USDA still buys all of our food, and we have a very intense relationship with them vis-a-vis the way we the way we work with them. They are part of this collaborative. I'm going to get the name wrong. What's the name of the working group, Judy? Yeah, it's a technical interagency working group that focuses on new food products, commodity reference guide issues, changes to micronutrient formulations. We have safety and quality. All of these issues are handled in that group, and so there is an ongoing close collaboration with USDA across all of those issues. We continue to look at and review the McGovern-Dole programs. They look at they're invited to review our development solicitations and programs. We, since Food for Peace is only monetizing in one country, we have had less of a need to collaborate on those issues, although I believe they're using our monetization manuals and guides, so we're very happy that they have taken a lot of the good work that we've done in that score and are using it for their programs. So I don't know if I've answered that question, but we do have a regular and ongoing dialogue with them. We travel with them to Rome for the WFP meetings, and there we are able to meet quite intensively at quite a high level on a whole range of issues. They've consulted us on their local and regional procurement guidance that they've put forward, asked our opinion. We've certainly been involved with them in discussing their guidelines for local and regional procurement. What are the most important lessons that we've learned and are being applied on local and regional procurement? Well, one of the things that we've seen, it's not really a lesson, but an observation, is that PBO partners are still reluctant to, there's not a lot of you working in local and regional procurement. You're very, very comfortable in the cash transfer food voucher space. That's your natural affinity. But if the choice is a voucher or a local and regional procurement that might be more efficient or something, I'm not sure. We're pushing people to do those analytics. I would say that WFP has that advantage of working in LRP and in Title II and cash transfers and food vouchers, and so they tend to have a much broader kind of set of questions that they're asking and a broader set of analytics that they're doing. We've discovered that local procurement is extremely cost efficient, around 40% more cost efficient than a Title II procurement. Regional procurement, less so, because of course it's regional, so you're moving it by truck from another country, and those efficiency savings I think are closer to 20%, 19 or 20% for regional, 40% for local procurement. So you're still getting a very big, bang, I think, on that score. What else have we learned about local and regional procurement? I'm sure there's a lot that I'm missing. Do you have anything, Danielle? Food safety issues, we have not seen huge problems with food safety for local and regional procurement, but it is something that we have our food technologists and team looking at, and food safety is always going to remain a high priority for us, whether it's local or regional procure food or Title II food. There's no question about that. Was that the last question?
Yes, that was the last question. So we should wrap up this part of the plenary. I don't know if either of you have any last comments, Dina or Mark?
I saw some recommendation or thought that maybe OFDA would be co-located with Food for Peace in the Ronald Reagan building. What did they do wrong to be deserving of that fate?
Well, yeah. No, thanks to all of you for your time and attention, and I wish you a very fruitful and productive workshop.
Thanks very much, Dina.